Hello, and welcome to another edition of the SEANC View podcast. This is Jonathan Owens, the Communications Director here at SEANC, joined this week by Executive Director Ardis Watkins. I did pause there, and just because I saw you laughing a little bit. And Government Relations Director Suzanne Beasley.
Thanks, John.
And Digital Communications Specialist Sam Cline. There's a little pause there, too. / podcast producer. With us today for this fine post-election episode of the SEANC View podcast is EMPAC Statewide Chairman Mark Dearmon, at least for a few more months, right, Mark?
Yeah, until January 1st.
Well, we're
glad to be here.
Glad to have you today to talk through all this big night we had last night. So let's just dive right in, I guess. What were your initial thoughts on the night? Anyone? Is everyone still asleep?
No. Okay, so number one, Mark and EMPAC, congratulations to EMPAC because y'all did really well last night in terms of success rate.
Yeah, we had 94% of our endorsed candidates were elected. That's the highest rate we've ever had, and it's the most candidates we've endorsed. We endorsed a total of 130 candidates, so really proud of that, although there were some disappointments in the night, too, that we'll talk about in a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, one of the things that I tell people when I tell them about our PAC is not only is it popular because it's nonpartisan and members make those decisions and members base them on the people one by one. And I mean, they are rigorous about going over it. But at the end of the day, the reason y'all are so successful in terms of outcome is because the members from all over the state are so representative of the citizens. And so for a politician, if I were a politician, I would absolutely pay attention to EMPAC's endorsements and to wanting EMPAC to be on my side because you have your finger on the pulse. There's no question.
Well, we certainly try to. And I want to take a minute just to give a shout out to all of the sitting members that went out and worked the early voting sites, passing out the palm cards and all the other things. That makes a big difference in this. And we passed out about 10,000 palm cards this year.
It's fantastic. Okay, so I want to tell you, I'm sorry, John, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I got real excited because yesterday at the polls, it was like every year in terms of the fact that we're the only people out there, I think, saying, hey, well, we've got nonpartisan endorsements from state employees. Everybody else is out there for either a candidate or a party. And so people always like to take our palm cards. We talk about that. But I think this year I noticed there seemed to be an even bigger hunger for something from a group that just wasn't partisan.
A neutral site, yeah. And one of the things we found this year also is that students at our universities love those palm cards because they were not as well versed on anything below the president. So you give them this nonpartisan palm card and they see the governor, the treasurer, and all these things on there. It helps them make some decisions because our folks will talk to them as they come up and kind of talk about the various candidates if they want to talk about them. So that's something we did a lot of this year, and I think it paid some dividends.
Didn't you guys also mail those out too, right?
Yeah, we did a mailing to all of our members, over 42,000 members, a postcard with the endorsed candidates for their particular area. It's the first time we've ever done that. And almost any time we do something, we get some complaints. We got no complaints about this. And I had so many people, so many members say how much they love those palm cards. They were going to take them to the polls. And some people were actually at the polls showing them to other people. So that was something we'll continue to do in the future. But that was
great feedback on that.
Well, some legislators called, John.
Even legislators. We've had quite a few legislators call, grateful for EMPAC's help, obviously. But yeah, we're really excited about the postcard in the mail that made a difference.
Yeah, my wife was not as versed in candidates, period, she said. So she was asking me who to vote for, and so I gave her our card.
Good for you.
So I think we got some votes there. Yeah.
Well, congratulations to everybody who won last night. Super big congratulations to Governor-elect Josh Stein.
I guess that's where we can start, right?
Yeah.
So big night for Josh Stein. I wanted to start by talking about a tweet I saw kind of not midnight, but mid the hubbub last night from Will Dorr and our friend at WRAL. He said, it's a weird election night in North Carolina. Trump won. I guess, spoiler alert, Trump won, as did the Republican judges. But at the same time, the Democrats won every major executive branch race, governor, AG, and superintendent of schools, which I don't know about that's not all of them, right?
No.
That's not. But I guess maybe he's talking about the competitive one. The only competitive U.S. House race. I guess he's talking about Don Davis's race, and even broke the GOP supermajority in the legislature. So just a weird night all around, I guess.
Yeah. The only Republicans that won council of state races were Mike Causey, Steve Troxler, Brad Briner, and Dave Bullock. And of course, Mike Causey and Steve Troxler were EMPAC-endorsed.
That's absolutely correct. And we're glad to have them back.
Speaking of the governor's race, I was really surprised and it was kind of funny how fast they called the Josh Stein race. I mean, it was like 7:07 when they came out.
Wasn't quite that early, but I went to Josh Stein's watch party down at the Marriott, and all of a sudden, a little after 7:30, after the polls closed, there was a roar in the room, and I looked on the screens, and they were calling Josh Stein as winning the governor's race. So that was a happy start of the evening.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, we keep doing it. We're in sync today,
That's
John.
right.
We keep speaking.
Is that what it is?
I wore my pink shirt yesterday in support of.
We're in sync. You go first this time.
Now you go first because I forgot what I was going to say.
You're such a gentleman. No, I was texting with some relatives from Texas, and they said, "Do y'all have any big races that you're watching tonight?" Talk about scenic. And as I'm writing back, I hit send, and then I'm like, hey, never mind, one of those is already, we're not watching it anymore. And they were like, are you being serious? And I'm like, no, it's over. It's done.
What I was going to say, I have an old habit as a reporter from a small town newspaper, have an old habit of watching the Board of Elections, like tallies as they come in. And from the first batch of, I guess, maybe early votes, you could tell there was a big, big difference between Trump's votes and Robinson's votes. And so I guess that's how they called it. They knew he was never going to catch up, I guess. So, I mean,
it was an early call.
Yeah. What do we take from his huge win? Is there anything we can glean from a 15-point win?
I mean, I think it is a unique situation because Robinson's campaign had difficulties, but it is still a decisive victory. I think with that kind of decisive victory, I think you do come into the governorship with a little more sway. And then in addition to that, the legislature last night really changed. There's no longer a supermajority, so his veto
has some weight.
Is meaningful should he veto anything. It's a really different experience for him in his first 2 years than Governor Cooper has had.
And his acceptance speech last night at the victory party was very on point with a lot of our issues. You know, better pay. Schools are important, you know, future and, you know, working with the working class folks and things like that. So there was a lot of good things that he said in his acceptance speech that, you know, I think line up with us very, very well. So we're looking forward to working with Josh Stein, or Governor Josh Stein now, or soon to be.
Governor-elect.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, I think he does come in, John, with a full head of steam, and we'll see what he does with that.
So obviously another race that's very important to us is the state treasurer's race. So we'll just go straight to that one. Brad Briner did defeat Representative Wesley Harris, who we had endorsed.
Yeah.
I saw that Briner put out a statement last night, and in it he did mention state employees and retirees and a willingness to work with us. So we'll see how that pans out. But what were your thoughts on that race?
Well, I mean, I wish our endorsed candidate had won that race. I think Wesley Harris would have made a great treasurer. But what I just told a Senate committee that's meeting here is, look, the people of this state have spoken, and they have chosen Brad Briner as their treasurer. And so, like all elected officials, what we do at this point is we move forward and we do, as we do with all elected officials, we do our best to work with Treasurer-elect Briner. And hopefully, I mean, I think that like all groups, there's a lot that we can offer and share in terms of insight of people who actually are in those plans that he's going to administer, because they're huge. The state, it's not the only things the treasurer does, but the retirement system and the health plan are massive. And they're critical not just to our members and other state employees and retirees, but they're critical to the economy of the state.
And when we interviewed him back in January, we interviewed he and Wesley and all the other candidates, and he expressed a willingness to work with the state employees and retirees. So we're hoping he's still in that mood when we reach out to him down the road.
I mean, there's plenty of cases where we've not endorsed a candidate in the legislature and then wound up having
yeah. Well, I mean, we still got work to do. So regardless of our endorsements, whoever wins and take those offices, we've got to go talk to them. We've got to build a relationship there.
Mike Causey, the first time Mike Causey won, we endorsed his opponent, who was the incumbent, who had a good working relationship with SEANC. And we endorsed Wayne Goodwin, who was the incumbent. Mike Causey didn't love that, but he worked with us and actually built such a relationship with our members that they were it was a resounding endorsement for Mike Causey. So, endorsements are important.
Yeah.
But in our world, that's not.
You got to move on.
Yeah, you got to move on.
Josh Dobson, same situation there, right? We butted heads with him a few times, and now he's
when he was in the legislature.
Yeah. So looking at the other races in the Council of State, I guess the other big ones were Jeff Jackson winning the Attorney General's race over Dan Bishop, which we endorsed Jeff Jackson.
Yes, we did.
And Mo Green winning state superintendent.
Yeah, both those are two really big wins for us. Those two endorsements, they were really big. That was important. Really excited about both of them. But Mo Green, excited to have him because it was scary what he was running against. Someone who calls public schools indoctrination centers and has never had a child in a public school. And Mo Green ran the second or third largest public school, Guilford County public schools, and did a stellar job and raised their ratings and everything like that. So I'm really excited about having him in the superintendent's position. And the same thing with Jeff Jackson. Jeff Jackson is just a great guy. He's going to make a great attorney general. He's not a political person. He's looking to follow the Constitution and enforce the law. And you heard him, if you saw him in his commercials, he talked about it during his commercials too. So really excited to have Jeff on board.
That was a hard-fought race.
It was.
Jeff Jackson, Dan Bishop.
Yeah, it ended with lawsuits. Your attorney's comment from last week.
The attorneys were the winners.
But
yeah, that was a hard-fought and very expensive race. But that wasn't too surprising. Those guys were both pretty heavy hitters coming out of Congress. So
one race I thought was interesting was the lieutenant governor's race. Rachel Hunt defeated Hal Weatherman, just because I've seen so much more of Hal Weatherman than I've seen of anything from Rachel Hunt. I think the only thing I really saw was the video of her cleaning out the office, that whole thing.
Right.
But she still pulled it out. Looks like she won by about 90,000 votes.
Yeah, and he ran a very grassroots campaign. He was apparently driving around the state in a RV and talking to folks. So, old style campaign.
Yeah, obviously Rachel Hunt was the scenic endorsed candidate. I have to admit, yes, Hal Weatherman, who was not the scenic endorsed candidate, it was an impressive thing to watch in terms of a grassroots effort. I think that old school politics can be very effective. I'm not sure what all happened. How much of that, we won't ever know how much of this is the Mark Robinson drag.
Mm-hmm.
True. Dragging them down.
Good point.
Yeah, a lot of pundits were saying that Mark Robinson effect would have a huge impact all the way down the ballot. Looking at two Republicans who did win seats, though, Mike Causey, which we've already mentioned, and our old friend Steve Troxler, EMPAC-endorsed Commissioner of Agriculture. Looks like he stole Dale Falwell's title of most votes. Maybe
No, Commissioner Troxler got the most. Well,
did he get last?
20. He got.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Far more than anyone.
Oh, he's
Commissioner Troxler
popular.
is the GOAT
Yeah.
of Council of State politics. Honestly, he pulls more votes than anyone, and he continued that.
Why doesn't he aspire to other offices, or is he just like...
I think he's
found his niche.
Happy where he's at.
And he's good at it, and we're thankful for him.
So those two won, and then our old friend and longtime Senate member, Elaine Marshall, she won by about 100,000 votes in the Secretary of State's race. Thought that race was going to be pretty close, and I guess that is still pretty close.
Well, it was even closer earlier. Some of the early votes came in, and he was leading. And I didn't think anybody could beat Elaine Marshall, but she had a little scare last night.
He ran a race.
Yep.
My dad always says, that's the lady who beat Richard Petty.
Oh, yeah. And I don't know if you remember, the slogan that worked was a serious candidate for serious office.
There you go. So she's been in that long then, I guess, right?
I don't know that slogan would work in this day and time.
Yeah, you have a good memory.
I do.
And then our final Council of State endorsement was for Jessica Holmes, and she lost to Dave Ballot. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm sure his family's happy that he's going to be the auditor, because they ran commercials saying they wanted him to be the auditor so that he could get out of the house. But I hated to see Jessica lose.
Well, I mean, one of the interesting things about Dave Ballot and Brad Briner is that they were both endorsed by the News and Observer,
Mm-hmm.
and they won. And what I find really interesting about that is that normally whatever the News and Observer does can be bristly to many of the Republicans in charge in Raleigh. In this case, I honestly think that was a huge factor.
And it's not just the News and Observer now; it's the Charlotte Observer and the Durham paper. So that's
the conglomeration.
Yeah, and that's a statewide race, so that has impact. Maybe Charlotte Observer has a better track record with endorsements, but
they all came out the exact same way. And I'll have to admit, I was disappointed they didn't run my letter to the editor commenting on that race.
Yeah, you had a good letter.
Yeah, that was maybe that's a story for a different time, but that was an interesting decision.
It was.
Paper not take criticism on their endorsements.
So much for freedom of speech, right?
It's an interesting world these days. But I do think that was I think it was a big factor, to be honest.
I think it was too.
And the race we did not endorse in, Luke Farley defeated Braxton Winston II in the Commissioner of Labor race. So I just mentioned that just so everyone knows that we also knew that. Any thoughts on that race?
We just set that one out.
What was the margin on that? I don't even remember.
It looks like it was pretty big. It was 310,000 votes.
Okay.
So moving on to the legislature, what's it going to mean to have one, I guess, house that is not in the supermajority now?
So it gives you a chance to swing a vote, to make some good policy without it just automatically getting vetoed and then the governor not being able to do anything about it. So Governor-elect Josh Stein will have some extra power behind what he can do. And in the legislature, not having a supermajority in the legislature is awesome because you can go around and talk to everyone, swing some votes, pass some good legislation, do some good policy work. When there's a supermajority, I think when it's a simple majority, it gives some members more freedom to be independent thinkers, which I think is good for them at election time for the most part. And B, for a group like us, which is a nonpartisan group, we're not a given for anybody. We're not, just because you have one of the consonants after your name doesn't mean SEANC's with you. We take each candidate as a person, as what they have done. Right.
Mm-hmm. And it's hard. If you're in a supermajority, it's like you kind of get swept along with the crowd or else.
Herd mentality.
Yeah. And there's, in both parties, honestly, even the minority party has been more and more kind of vengeful on their own when they don't stick together on votes. And we've seen a lot. We've seen days when definitely people were more willing to step out and be themselves. Again, I don't think it's the best thing for candidates. I think you might see that each party in certain races learned some things last night.
My one concern is that they may try to get someone to flip from Democrat to Republican to break the supermajority like they did in 2022.
That was going to be my controversial question. Is anyone going to pull a Tricia Cotham and switch parties?
It could happen. It could happen. I mean, it happened 2 years ago.
Any specific races you want to talk about? I know that we did endorse Dante Pittman, who was kind of the star of the night for his win in his race. Any other house?
And it came out at the very last minute last night when I went to bed. He was still behind. Got up this morning and he had won, and he's got enough of a margin where I think it'll stick. The other one, the real heartbreaker for me, is Terrence Everett. He was the only Senate candidate that we endorsed. He's a former legislator of the year, a close friend of SEANC. I've worked with his campaign a lot, and he lost when the last precinct came in. He had been hit almost the entire evening, but the last precinct came in, he was behind by 38 votes.
Yeah.
38 votes. And that was a real heartbreaker because Terrence is as good as they come. And there'll be a recount. There may be some other votes that come in, absentees that'll come in. But it's tough. It's really tough. And I hated it for him.
Well, Terrence is a longtime friend. Who knows what he's going to do in the future? That's the thing about a lot of these candidates. No telling who will be back again to do what. Terrence is a young man. Jessica Holmes is a young woman. And who knows what they're going to do next. And who knows, like Mark Robinson, somebody asked him last night, what are you doing next?
Yeah.
I don't know what he's going to do. Who knows?
I think
he didn't say.
There was a tweet that Mark for Senate 2024 domain had been reserved or something like that.
It was 2026.
2026, yeah. Yeah. There was someone had sleuthed that out, I guess.
Yeah.
So speaking of what's next, what about Roy Cooper? What's next for him? He was actually seemed pretty happy last night.
Yeah, he was at Josh's victory party. Introduced Josh, actually.
It would have been a happy night. Number one,
It was.
you're not going to have to deal with any of this anymore, which is, there's
Happened
got to
right
be a
there.
sense of relief to that. But also, he has been a mentor to Stein, known him forever. That had to be a really special
Yeah.
moment to see him actually win the seat to succeed him. And but going back just 1 second, I'm wondering, last night, all I could wonder, how much buyer's remorse was there?
Yeah.
You know, how would that race have gone? Just curiosity. If it had been Falwell and Stein, it would have
Yeah.
been really interesting.
It would
Yeah.
have been.
Um,
We knew that Falwell was the better candidate of the Republicans, but it didn't work for him.
Certainly wouldn't have had a lot of the baggage, right? I mean,
Right. I mean, I think Josh Stein's going to make a great governor, and we wholeheartedly endorse him and support him. But I do think just in terms of a more interesting race, there's no question. So when you bring up, is Mark Robinson going to run for Senate? It makes me wonder, what would that primary look like now?
Yeah.
I don't think it would end well.
I guess maybe that's why I said, Roy, is he going to run too for Senate?
I mean,
He's playing
gotta
his
give
cards.
something, right?
He's
Who
playing
knows?
his cards close to the vest.
He's
Yeah.
just going to go to Carolina games for the next 10 years.
I think he's too young
And can't hurricane.
to just go home. He's been in public service forever, and he's, you know, if you're in public service long enough, it's really hard to get that out of your system.
So I was looking at the results, and it looks like the Democrats have a pretty deep bench now for the governor's race for 6 terms in a row, right? I mean, you have Stein, who has 2 terms, right? I mean, could be, theoretically. Then Hunt, that's a big name. That would be a formidable candidate. And then Jackson coming up behind her. So is that a thing that we should talk about?
I mean, if you look at modern history for the governorship, it's either the lieutenant governor or the AG for the last few decades that has become our governor, with the exception of Pat McCrory coming out of
Yeah.
having been mayor of Charlotte. It very well could have an impact. You also, it's a different world now, though. I really
really
think wouldn't be shocked to see somebody just come absolutely out of the woodwork, kind of like Robinson did when he won lieutenant governor.
Right. And that's 8 years away in all likelihood, so it'll be okay.
It's 24 years away if you think about it.
Yeah, well,
No, wait, 6 times 4. Yeah, 24.
Well, the Republicans might differ with you on that. They might.
Yeah,
say,
that's
you got 4 years from now to deal with.
Last point. I'm just fascinated by the numbers. So Trump got 2.8 million votes in North Carolina. Stein got 3 million votes. So there was obviously Trump-Stein voters.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I brought that up earlier that I didn't expect that to be the case, but
Gosh, yes. Yeah.
there were
that
a
was
lot if you think about it, because that's a hard math problem to do there, but yeah.
With what happened in Robinson's candidacy, that was no question that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And it's not an unusual thing in North Carolina generally that we go red for the presidency, blue for the governor's mansion. But this one, I think it was a given
yeah,
for months now.
I totally agree with that.
Speaking of Trump, there was another race on the night, a presidential race. Trump won North Carolina, and he also won presidency. He will be returning to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Do we want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think you asked us to guess last week.
Yeah.
And I told you I never guessed, but I was going to guess that Kamala Harris would win the presidency, and that my reasoning was I wasn't hearing people saying, I just don't like her, in the way they said that about Hillary Clinton. But at the end of the day, that had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I
Who
also...
knows? Everybody's armchair quarterback and what it was.
Yeah, I also said that I thought she would win because she had some momentum, and I immediately regretted that decision because I shouldn't make those proclamations.
No one should ever guess at the presidential election, but we did, and
Yeah, we were wrong.
we were wrong, and the chances of that when you guess at that are really high. But especially in North Carolina, it is. You just don't know.
Yeah.
It's weird to say that, though, because other than Barack Obama in 2008, you could probably put your money on red in North Carolina for a presidential election and know you're going to win that bet.
Yeah.
But there's something about North Carolina that is always uncertain. It always feels like it could be anybody's anybody's ball.
Yeah, we're a swing state until we're not.
Right. We're very swingy. It's just got to be the right
dance partner.
Yeah, the right.
Hey, what a metaphor. So I didn't expect Kamala to win here, but thought it may be a little closer than it was. But I mean, you're right. I think you can kind of expect North Carolina to be red until proven otherwise. Any other races we want to talk about? Let's put election 2024 in the books and move towards 2025. And speaking of moving on, the legislature comes back to town next week, right?
Yeah, on the 19th. So we won't move on.
I know
just
this will be
quite
the old
yet.
one.
Yeah, so this is, still our current legislature. The last 2 times they've returned to town, it's been specifically to address storm relief from Hurricane Helene. So we're going to have to go back in and start, reminding legislators that nothing has changed for all state employees and retirees. We're still in the same vacancy crisis. There's almost a quarter of your workforce that's vacant. Pay raises or bonus money, anything extra or just anything in general has not been addressed because we got sidetracked by the storm, which is appropriate. We had to stop and help people, but we've got to start having those conversations again when they return to town.
But you can't help people if you don't
Right.
have the people that are supposed to
Right.
be there to help people.
And I mean, we've had these conversations internally about, roads out west, things they're trying to do. And here's the bottom line. If you don't have enough engineers with DOT to go around and inspect all those roads that whoever, got back into some sort of shape, then you don't have a viable road.
Can you imagine what we're paying contractors
Yeah.
to get this done because we don't have enough people, and compare that to what it would have cost to have enough people?
Speaking of that, remember last week we talked about the West Virginia boys and their road through Bat Cave and Chimney Rock area. I think there was a story this week that DOT had said that road is, we're not condoning that race. We're not saying you should travel on that road.
They said it's not safe for vehicular traffic. You can take an ATV down it or walk down it or something, which is good. You need something. But they put it on private land, which DOT cannot do. DOT's actually in that area moving the river
Isn't that crazy?
back to where it was. So the only way DOT, people are very frustrated. They are mad at DOT. Part of what we try to do with this podcast, y'all, is get the truth about matters related to state employees out there. And when that came up last week, it just seemed the first thing that jumped to my mind was that may not be safe. And I think I said that out loud.
Yeah.
And then we see this article this week where DOT comes out and says it's not safe. The problem is if some people who are coming and just want to help and establish something on somebody's private land, if somebody gets hurt, I mean, there's probably still liability associated with that. However, DOT can't take that on in terms of liability, and they can't build something they know is not safe for vehicular traffic because you can't monitor and make sure no vehicles go across it, and they don't have control of it because it's someone's private property. So a lot of this mud people are throwing at state employees is just it's based on misinformation. And it's just very easy to say, look what the state wouldn't do, but these nice guys from West Virginia came and did it. But the company they work for, in the story on that road, it said that the news station, it was a TV station, I think, that did this story, contacted that company, and the company had no comment. Well, I bet they did.
Yeah.
Because, they would be, if somebody got harmed on that path, they sure would be. So that's a whole mess.
And it's also important they don't think about the people that were affected, state employees that were affected by this.
Right.
Some of them lost literally everything, but went back to work the very next day.
Yeah.
And they're with the universities, with DOT, with the hospitals and the prisons and everything else. And, those are some dedicated folks, and they deserve a little shout out here too.
And none of this is to say that the people between Bat Cave and Chimney Rock or anywhere around there should not want people from anywhere to come volunteer and help them. My God, if I was them after all this time, anybody that would come build anything would be welcomed with open arms. I'd put them up in whatever I had left of a home. I'd cook them meals. And that's the way it should be. It's just that, again, people don't understand why some of these things don't happen in the time we want them to. But if you're trying to move a river,
yeah,
I can't even imagine that.
And
And I think part of too, when the storm happened and there was so much hullabaloo about DOT not getting out there quick enough, about the government not acting quick enough.
Well, Mark Robinson started a lot of that.
Yeah, he did.
But you have to assess before you get out there and
You
do things.
do. There has
You
to
can't
be
just
some.
go flying in there with dirt movers and
Exactly.
things like that. You got to figure out
There
what
has
needs
to
be done
be
and
some
prioritize.
organization about it. I mean, you go in there just on your own and you end up on the side of a mountain and, you've turned over your ATV. Nobody knows you're out there. At that point, you're becoming a hindrance to rescue efforts.
Yeah. If you live in one of those areas, those gorgeous areas that were so devastated, and you're still so devastated, and now with the bitter cold coming, we've not forgotten you, but neither has your state. Your state employees have never, ever in this process forgotten you. And don't let anybody try to convince you of that. We all care about you. And I promise you, Secretary Hopkins and the rest of the secretaries and commissioners of all of those agencies they've just been amazing during this thing. And I am so sorry it's taking so long to put the pieces back together. But it takes us right back where we started. All the pieces are being put back together by a team that has 75% of what it should
have.
It's like getting on the field for the Super Bowl with 75% of your team. How's that going to go for you? You're probably not going to do well.
that's actually happening a lot this year. There's a lot of injuries in the NFL, but I digress.
Well, you got somebody else that's the beauty though. You got somebody else on the bench. You've got big rosters.
Yeah.
No NFL owner is ever going to go in there without plenty of people to get
So we
the
just
job
need
done.
a bench of state employees ready to fill in when the
Right.
vacancies come up.
Or we need to approach state government public services for the public the way NFL owners approach games. Make sure you've got enough people.
And pay them millions of dollars.
Yes. That would work. Sounds great.
Well, that's all I have for this week. Did want to go to the question of the week. And so I cheated this week a little bit. As you've all noticed, I've kind of run out of topics. So I found this list of 100 questions to ask at your work, I guess.
Oh, good.
So we'll look
Are we
through
going to do
here.
all 100 of them?
No, we're going to pick one, and hopefully it'll be good. Okay, here it is.
John's wacky weird question of the week.
All right, so the question is, what's your theme song when you entered a room?
Suzanne probably knows immediately what her theme song would be. When you enter a
Oh,
room,
God.
like in your mind, what are you hearing in your
Yeah.
mind?
Enter Sandman by Metallica.
There you go. Well, we run into this at the convention every year, artists. We have to pick a song for you to come out to.
Yeah.
What was it?
Which
this year?
usually is one of the funnest things to do
Yeah.
when we're getting ready for convention, but she's country. Has always been one
Yeah,
for you.
country music is my thing, but I like to dance. So
yeah, you're
dance music's always in my head.
The wobble.
She can waddle all the way
Yeah, it
up
could be the wobble.
the aisle.
Well, my bumper music is what's called when you go on stage is power to the people.
Oh,
because
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
always fighting
That's
for
right.
Yeah,
the state employees and retirees in this state. So power to the people would be my
I know.
first choice.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and tell you. I can not guess the song, but I can tell you what the artist is for Sammy.
Oh, I
I still
probably can
guess.
too, actually.
Can you? What do you guess?
It's Taylor Swift.
Oh my gosh!
Are
I
you
was
ready for
gonna say-
it?
You
well known.
I was going to say Sabrina
Full on
Carpenter.
Reputation era.
Is that a song or?
Reputation is one of her albums, and Ready for It is one of the songs that Simone Biles actually includes in her floor routine at the Olympics.
Ready for it. That's a good
That's
thing
like
for you,
the
actually.
That's like the perfect
Ready for
storm
everything.
of Sam things.
It
huh?
was. It was like, yeah, gymnastics and Taylor. And that was a little pop culture lesson in about 10 seconds.
I don't know if I have one.
Come
Oh,
on.
come on,
John.
John.
Something-
You know you do.
Something for the drive-by truckers. Do you know who that is?
Uh-uh.
No. Okay. I'll have to give you a mixtape to listen to. Or Return of the Mac has always been
That's a good one.
So
That's a good
My-
one.
roommate and I used to like sing that at karaoke sometimes and say it for.
I'm sorry, you
Oh
don't
my
have to take it
gosh.
down. We'd love to see it.
Yeah, we gotta,
I'm sure there probably are some. around.
well, there's not been a shameless plug for anything on this podcast today, so I want to point that out.
Yeah,
Say good for
yeah.
us.
Yeah, I haven't had any reports from the pottery shop to share this
And
week.
there it is.
Well, that's all. That's all we have this week. I hope we left you with a little cheer this week, and we'll see you next time.